Daddy's Day with the two daughters. So we'd start out and try to go someplace with, different things, and I take them to the merry-go-round, and I took them different places. And
in 1966, the world lost a man who had transformed imagination into reality. Today, the name Walt Disney represents magic, movies, theme parks, and one of the largest entertainment companies ever created. Millions of people visit Disney parks every year. Generations have grown up watching Disney characters come to life on screen. But behind the castles, the cartoons, and the billions of dollars was a story that was far darker than most people know. Before Walt Disney became a legend, he was a struggling young artist who faced rejection, financial disaster, and moments when his dreams seemed impossible. He lost his first animation company. He experienced bankruptcy. He watched his creations slip away from him. Many people believed he had failed, but Walt Disney had something that separated him from everyone else: the ability to imagine a future that did not exist yet. While others saw a cartoon character, he saw a cultural icon. While others saw a risky idea, he saw an opportunity. While others saw failure, he saw another chance to begin again. This is the untold story of how a young man with almost nothing built a dream that would eventually become one of the greatest entertainment empires in history. This is the story of Walt Disney. Chapter 1: The Boy Who Drew Dreams. Before the world knew him as Walt Disney, he was simply a boy with a pencil, a powerful imagination, and a dream that seemed far bigger than his circumstances. Walter Elias Disney was born on December 5, 1901, in Chicago, Illinois. His family was not wealthy. His father, Elias Disney, worked various jobs to support the household, but money was often tight. Looking for a better life, the Disney family eventually moved away from Chicago and settled on a farm near Marceline, Missouri. For young Walt, those years on the farm became some of the most important moments of his life. The small town, the animals, the fields, the trains passing nearby, all of these experiences would later influence the worlds he created. Unlike many children who simply saw ordinary things, Walt saw stories everywhere. A mouse was not just a mouse. A tree was not just a tree. A train was not just a machine. Everything had personality. Everything had a story. From a young age, Walt loved drawing. He would sketch animals, people, and scenes from his imagination. He even sold some of his drawings to neighbors, discovering that his talent could connect with other people. But life was not easy. His family struggled financially, and Walt had to work hard from a young age. While attending school, he helped deliver newspapers for his father's business. The long hours taught him discipline, but they also meant he had less time for the thing he loved most: art. Still, his passion never disappeared. As a teenager, Walt became fascinated with animation and filmmaking. At the time, animation was still a new and experimental form of entertainment. Most people saw cartoons as simple drawings for children. Walt saw something completely different. He believed animation could become a powerful storytelling medium. He believed drawings could have emotions. He believed imaginary worlds could feel real. That belief would eventually change entertainment forever. After high school, Walt tried to pursue his artistic ambitions. He studied art and worked at different companies where he improved his skills. He learned about advertising, illustration, and animation, but success did not come quickly. The young artist faced rejection repeatedly. Companies turned him away. Opportunities disappeared. Many people did not understand his vision, but Walt had a habit that would define his entire life. He refused to quit. In the early 1920s, he moved toward the world of animation, working in Kansas City where he experimented with creating short animated films. This was where he began learning the business side of creativity. He discovered that having talent was not enough. An artist needed money. An idea needed investors. A dream needed a business behind it. So Walt created his first company, Laugh-O-Gram Studios. At first, it seemed like the beginning of something great. The studio produced animated shorts and attracted attention. Walt surrounded himself with talented artists and believed he was finally building the future he had imagined. But success was fragile. The company struggled with money problems. Expenses increased. Payments from distributors were delayed. The dream that Walt had worked so hard to create began falling apart. Soon, the studio that represented his greatest hope became his greatest failure. In 1923, Laugh-O-Gram Studios collapsed. Walt Disney was officially bankrupt. He was only in his early 20s. Many people would have considered that the end of the story. But for Walt Disney, it was only the beginning. With almost no money left, he packed his belongings and traveled west to California with a new dream. Hollywood, a place where movies were changing the world, a place where he believed animation could find its future. But Walt was about to discover that Hollywood would test him even more than Kansas City had. Because before he could build an empire, he first had to survive losing everything. Chapter 2: Bankruptcy, Betrayal, and Starting Again. In 1923, Walt Disney arrived in Hollywood carrying almost nothing. He had a suitcase, a few drawings, and a belief that his future could be different. But the reality was much harsher. Hollywood was already filled with ambitious creators chasing their dreams. Thousands of people arrived every year hoping to become successful, but only a few ever managed to survive. For Walt Disney, survival itself was the first challenge. After the collapse of Laugh-O-Gram Studios, he had lost almost everything. His first company was gone, his money was gone, and many people would have considered him a failure. But Walt did not see bankruptcy as the end. He saw it as a lesson. He understood that talent alone would never be enough. If he wanted to create something lasting, he needed to understand business, storytelling, and innovation. In Hollywood, Walt reunited with his older brother, Roy Disney. Roy was not an artist like Walt, but he understood finances and organization. The two brothers decided to build something together. They created the Disney Brothers Studio. It was a small operation with a simple goal: create animated stories that people had never seen before. Their first opportunity came through a series called Alice Comedies. The idea was unusual for its time. Instead of creating only animated characters, Walt combined live-action footage with animation. A real child would enter a cartoon world filled with animated characters and adventures. The concept was creative and different. Slowly, the series gained attention. For the first time, Walt Disney felt that success might actually be possible. The young animator who had once lost everything was finally getting recognition. But success in Hollywood came with dangers. The animation industry was competitive, and creators depended heavily on distributors who controlled how their work reached audiences. Walt believed that creating great stories was the most important thing. But he would soon learn a painful lesson. In Hollywood, ownership could matter just as much as creativity. The Rise of Oswald. After the success of Alice Comedies, Walt wanted to create a new animated character. In 1927, he developed a cartoon rabbit named Oswald. The character was energetic, funny, and designed to appeal to audiences. Oswald the Lucky Rabbit became a success. For the first time, Walt had created a character that could compete with other popular cartoon figures of the era. The future looked bright, but behind the scenes, problems were developing. Walt worked with a distributor who controlled the business side of Oswald's cartoons. When Walt traveled to negotiate a better contract, he discovered something shocking. The distributor had secretly taken control of the Oswald character. Not only that, but many of Walt's own employees had been convinced to leave and work for the rival company. The character Walt created was no longer his. Years of effort had been taken away from him. For Walt Disney, this was one of the most painful moments of his career. He had lost his creation. He had lost members of his team, and once again he was standing at the edge of failure. But this time, Walt responded differently. Instead of trying to get Oswald back, he decided to create something completely new, something that nobody could take away from him, a character that would change the world. The birth of Mickey Mouse. On a train journey back to California, Walt began developing a new idea: a small mouse, a character with personality, humor, and emotions. According to Walt's recollections, the inspiration came partly from a mouse he had encountered in his old studio. The original name was Mortimer Mouse. But Walt's wife, Lillian Disney, suggested a different name, Mickey, and history was about to change. Mickey Mouse was not just another cartoon character. Walt wanted Mickey to feel alive. He wanted audiences to connect with him emotionally. At the time, Many animated characters were simple drawings that existed only to make people laugh. Walt wanted more. He wanted animation to tell stories. He wanted characters with dreams, fears, and personalities. But creating Mickey Mouse was another huge risk. After losing Oswald, Walt had very little security left. Another failure could destroy his company. Still, he continued. In 1928, Walt created a short animated film called Steamboat Willie. What made it revolutionary was not only the character of Mickey Mouse, it was sound. At a time when many cartoons were silent, Walt introduced synchronized sound with animation. The result amazed audiences. People had never experienced anything like it. Mickey Mouse became an instant sensation. The character that began as a desperate attempt to recover from failure became one of the most recognizable figures in the world. For the first time, Walt Disney was no longer just a struggling animator. He was becoming a pioneer. But success brought new pressure. Now the world was watching. Every new project required bigger ideas and greater risks. And Walt Disney was about to make the most dangerous gamble of his entire career. A project so ambitious that many people believed it would destroy him. A project that could either make him a legend or end his company forever. Chapter 3. Losing Everything and Creating Mickey Mouse. The success of Mickey Mouse changed everything for Walt Disney. After years of rejection, failure, and financial struggles, he finally had something the world wanted to see. But Walt was not satisfied with simply having a successful cartoon character. Many creators would have stopped there. They would have produced the same type of cartoons again and again, protecting their success. But Walt Disney had a different mindset. He believed that the moment you stop creating something new is the moment you begin falling behind. For Walt, success was not a destination. It was a responsibility. He wanted to push animation further than anyone thought possible. The man behind the mouse. Although Mickey Mouse became famous around the world, Walt understood something important. A character needed more than a recognizable appearance. It needed a personality. Walt personally worked on the development of Mickey's behavior, expressions, and emotions. He wanted audiences to feel that Mickey was not just a drawing moving across a screen. He wanted people to believe Mickey was alive. This approach transformed animation. Cartoons were no longer just short jokes. They became stories. They became emotional experiences. And this philosophy became the foundation of the Disney studio. But behind the success, Walt continued taking enormous risks. Every improvement required more money. Every new idea required more time. And Walt had a dangerous habit. He always dreamed bigger than his resources allowed. The Impossible Dream, a full-length animated film. By the early 1930s, Disney was already successful. But Walt wanted to do something that many people considered completely impossible. He wanted to create the first full-length animated feature film. At that time, animated cartoons were usually only a few minutes long. They were considered entertainment for children. Hollywood executives believed audiences would never sit through an entire movie made of drawings. They thought animation could not carry a serious story. They thought Walt Disney was making a terrible mistake. Some people even called the project Disney's folly. They believed Walt was risking everything for a dream that would fail, and the critics had reasons to doubt him. Creating a feature-length animated film was unbelievably expensive. Thousands of drawings were required. Hundreds of artists had to work for years. New techniques had to be invented. The pressure was enormous. For Walt, this was not just another movie. It was a battle to prove that animation was a real art form. The Making of Snow White. The project was based on the classic fairy tale Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But Walt wanted to create something different. He wanted audiences to laugh. He wanted them to feel fear. He wanted them to care about the characters. To achieve this, Disney artists studied human movement, facial expressions, and emotions. The studio experimented constantly. They developed new animation techniques. They spent years perfecting small details that audiences might never notice. But behind the scenes, the pressure was becoming overwhelming. The production costs continued rising. The movie was taking longer than expected. Some people inside the industry believed Walt had gone too far. Even some of his own employees questioned whether the project would succeed. There was a real possibility that the movie could bankrupt the company. Walt had already experienced bankruptcy once. Now he was risking everything again. The difference was that this time, the stakes were much higher. If Snow White failed, the Disney studio might disappear forever. The moment everything changed. In December 1937, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered. The audience entered the theater expecting a cartoon. Instead, they witnessed something completely new. They saw a world filled with emotion, music, adventure, and unforgettable characters. The reaction was extraordinary. People laughed, people cried, people were amazed that drawings could create such powerful emotions. The critics who had doubted Walt Disney were proven wrong. Snow White became a massive success. It earned millions of dollars and changed the future of cinema forever. The same man who had once been bankrupt had now created a film that transformed Hollywood. Walt Disney had proven something that many believed impossible. Animation could be art. The price of success. But success did not mean life became easy. The Disney studio continued expanding. More films followed. More employees joined. More ambitious projects were developed. But Walt's pursuit of perfection came with a cost. He demanded extremely high standards from his team. Every scene had to meet his vision. Every character had to feel real. This drive created incredible results, but it also created pressure inside the studio. Walt Disney was not simply building a company, he was building a new form of storytelling, and that required constant sacrifice. A new battle begins. After the triumph of Snow White, many people believed Walt Disney had reached the top, but history had another challenge waiting. The world was changing, the economy was uncertain, war was approaching, and the entertainment industry was about to enter one of its most difficult periods. The man who had survived bankruptcy, betrayal, and impossible odds was about to face another crisis. This time, he would have to fight not just for a movie, but for the future of his entire company. The golden age begins. After the success of Snow White, Walt invested the profits into expanding his studio. He built a larger animation facility in Burbank, California. The new studio was designed to become a creative center where artists, writers, and animators could develop new ideas. Walt believed the future of animation depended on innovation. He encouraged his team to experiment. He wanted better storytelling, better animation, more realistic characters. The studio began working on several ambitious projects, including Pinocchio, Fantasia, Bambi. These were not simple cartoons. They were artistic experiments. Walt wanted audiences to experience animation in a completely new way, but every experiment required enormous amounts of money and time. Chapter 4. The movie that nearly destroyed Disney. The success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs changed Walt Disney's life forever. The same people who once laughed at him now called him a genius. The same critics who believed animation was only for children were forced to admit that Walt had created something revolutionary, but success created a new challenge. The world now expected Walt Disney to continue delivering miracles, and Walt had no intention of repeating the past. He did not want to simply make another successful cartoon. He wanted to prove that Snow White was not a one-time achievement. He wanted to create films that would push animation even further. But ambition came with a price, and soon, Walt Disney would discover that reaching the top could be just as dangerous as trying to get there. Pinocchio, a beautiful risk. In 1940, Disney released Pinocchio. The film was visually stunning. The animation was more detailed than anything the studio had created before. The characters felt alive. The emotions were powerful. From a creative perspective, it was a masterpiece. But financially, the timing was terrible. The world was changing. Europe was entering the chaos of World War II, and international markets that had helped support Disney's success were disappearing. The film did not perform as expected financially during its initial release. For a company that had spent years and millions creating it, this was a serious problem. Then came another challenge. Fantasia, the film ahead of its time. Walt Disney's next idea was even more unusual. He wanted to combine animation with classical music. The result was Fantasia. It was unlike anything audiences had ever seen. Instead of a traditional story, the film created visual worlds inspired by famous musical compositions. Walt believed he was creating the future of cinema, but audiences were not prepared for it. The film was expensive, the technology was complicated, the reaction was mixed. Some people praised its creativity, others did not understand it. The project that Walt believed would change entertainment became another financial struggle. For the first time since creating Mickey Mouse, Walt Disney was facing serious pressure. The company that had once seemed unstoppable was now vulnerable. The war years. Then came World War II. The entertainment industry was deeply affected. The Disney studio faced difficult circumstances. International markets were damaged. Production became more complicated. The company experienced financial pressure. During the war, Disney also produced films and projects connected to the war effort. But the period was challenging. The magical world Walt created had collided with a harsh reality. For years, he had fought against creative challenges. Now he was fighting economic and global challenges. Many businesses would have collapsed under such pressure. But Walt Disney had already experienced failure before. He knew how to rebuild. A different kind of dream. After the war, Walt began thinking about something completely different. He was no longer focused only on movies. He started imagining a place where families could step inside the worlds he created. A place where children and adults could experience stories together. A place where imagination could exist in real life. That idea became Disneyland. But once again, people thought Walt was making a mistake. Theme parks already existed, but Walt did not want to build an ordinary amusement park. He wanted something revolutionary. He wanted cleanliness. He wanted storytelling. He wanted every street, building, and attraction to create an emotional experience. To many people, it sounded impossible. Banks were skeptical. Business experts doubted him. Some believed Walt was risking everything again. And they had a reason to worry. Because creating Disneyland would become the biggest gamble of his life. The man who never stopped dreaming. Throughout his career, Walt Disney followed the same pattern. He would achieve success. Then he would take a bigger risk. That risk would create problems. People would doubt him. And then he would prove them wrong. From Laugh-O-Gram Studios to Mickey Mouse. From Snow White to Disneyland. Walt Disney built his career by walking into places where others refused to go. But Disneyland was different. This time, he was not creating a movie. He was creating an entire world. And if it failed, it could destroy everything he had built. Chapter 5. The Battle to Build a New World. By the early 1950s, Walt Disney had already achieved what many people believed was impossible. He had created Mickey Mouse. He had transformed animation. He had produced the first successful animated feature film. He had built one of Hollywood's most respected studios. But Walt Disney was not a man who was satisfied with past achievements. While others looked at what he had already created, Walt was focused on what did not exist yet. And his next idea was his most ambitious dream. A place where imagination would not be limited to a movie screen. A place where families could walk into the stories they loved. A place where fantasy could become reality. That place would be called Disneyland. The dream everyone thought was impossible. The idea of Disneyland came from Walt's own experiences. He often visited amusement parks with his daughters, but he noticed something missing. Many amusement parks were dirty, poorly organized, and designed mainly for entertainment rides. Walt imagined something completely different. He wanted a park where parents and children could enjoy themselves together. He wanted every detail to tell a story. The buildings, the music, the characters, the attractions, everything would be part of one giant experience. But when Walt shared his idea, many people thought he had lost his mind. Business experts questioned why anyone would spend millions building a theme park. Movie executives believed Walt should focus on films. Banks were hesitant to finance such an unusual project. Once again, Walt Disney found himself fighting against disbelief. But this was a battle he knew well. His entire career had been built on ideas that others considered impossible. Taking the biggest risk of his life, building Disneyland required enormous financial resources. Walt needed money, but many traditional investors refused to support the project. The reason was simple. Nobody knew if it would work. A movie could be successful and earn money quickly. A theme park was different. It required land, construction, employees, maintenance. a massive investment before a single visitor walked through the gates. For many businessmen, it was too risky, but Walt found another way. He created a partnership with television networks and used television to promote the park before it even opened. This was another example of Walt thinking differently. He did not see television as competition, he saw it as a tool. He created programs that introduced audiences to Disney stories while also building excitement for Disneyland. The strategy helped bring his dream closer to reality. Building the magic construction began in Anaheim, California. The project moved quickly, but the pressure was intense. Walt personally supervised many details. He wanted Disneyland to feel different from anything people had experienced before. He focused on things others might ignore: the layout of streets, the appearance of buildings, the atmosphere, the smallest details. To Walt, these details mattered because they created emotion. He understood something powerful. People do not remember only what they see, they remember how something makes them feel. That idea became one of the foundations of Disney's success. The disaster of opening day. On July 17, 1955, Disneyland officially opened. The day that was supposed to represent Walt Disney's greatest achievement quickly became a nightmare. The opening was filled with problems. Temperatures were extremely high. The crowds were overwhelming. Some areas were unfinished. Technical issues affected attractions. There were even problems with counterfeit tickets causing more visitors than expected. Critics quickly attacked the park. Newspapers described the opening as a disaster. For many people, it looked like another failure in Walt Disney's long history of risks. But Walt did not see it that way. He believed the problems could be fixed, and he was right. The rise of Disneyland. After the difficult opening day, Disneyland improved rapidly. Visitors began arriving in large numbers. Families loved the experience. Children wanted to meet Disney characters. Adults appreciated the creativity and attention to detail. The park became more than an amusement attraction. It became a destination, a place where memories were created, a place where generations could connect. Disneyland proved that Walt's idea was not only possible, it was revolutionary. He had created an entirely new form of entertainment, beyond Disneyland. But even after Disneyland became successful, Walt Disney was still thinking about the future. He imagined a world where technology, storytelling, and creativity could come together. He wanted to create experiences that educated, inspired, and entertained people. This vision eventually led him toward another ambitious project, the idea that would later become Walt Disney World and Epcot. However, Walt would not live long enough to see all of his dreams completed. The man who spent his entire life creating magical worlds was approaching the final chapter of his own story. But even as his health declined, his imagination never stopped. Because Walt Disney was never just building movies or theme parks, he was building a legacy. Chapter 6: The Empire Walt Left Behind. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, Walt Disney had achieved something almost unbelievable. The young man who had once lost his first company, the artist who had faced bankruptcy, the creator who had been betrayed and forced to start again, had become one of the most influential figures in entertainment history. But for Walt Disney, success was never about money alone. It was about creating something that would survive beyond his own lifetime. He was always thinking about the future, the final vision. Even after the success of Disneyland, Walt's imagination continued to expand. He began developing an idea that was even larger than a theme park. He imagined a futuristic community where people could experience new technology, innovative transportation, and better ways of living. This dream became known as the Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow, or Epcot. Unlike Disneyland, which was based on fantasy and storytelling, Epcot was focused on the future. Walt imagined a place where scientists, designers, and engineers could work together to create solutions for tomorrow's world. It was a bold idea. Some people called it unrealistic, but that was something Walt Disney had heard his entire life. Again and again, people told him his dreams were impossible, and again he proved them wrong. The final years. However, behind the scenes, Walt's health was beginning to decline. Decades of intense work had taken a toll. He had spent his life pushing himself beyond normal limits. He worked long hours. He demanded perfection. He constantly chased new ideas. Even during his final years, he remained involved in creative projects. He continued planning new possibilities. He continued imagining worlds that did not exist yet, because for Walt Disney, imagination was never just a job, it was the way he saw life. The death of Walt Disney. In 1966, Walt Disney was diagnosed with lung cancer. On December 15, 1966, at the age of 65, Walt Disney passed away. The world lost one of its greatest storytellers, but his dreams did not disappear with him. The company he created continued moving forward. His brother Roy Disney stepped in to complete some of Walt's unfinished plans, including the development of Walt Disney World in Florida. In 1971, Walt Disney World opened. It became a symbol of the vision Walt had carried for decades, a place where millions of people could experience the magic he imagined. The empire after Walt. After Walt Disney's death, many wondered whether the company could survive without its founder. After all, Walt had been the creative force behind everything. His ideas shaped the company's identity. His imagination guided its direction. But the foundation he built was strong. Over the decades, Disney expanded beyond animation. It entered television. It created new generations of films. It developed global theme parks. It acquired major entertainment brands. The small animation studio Walt created grew into one of the largest media companies in the world. Today, the Disney name represents much more than cartoons. It represents storytelling on a global scale. The real story behind the empire. When people look at Disney today, they often see the success. They see the castles. They see the movies. They see the billions of dollars. But the true story began somewhere completely different. It began with a young artist who failed, a man who lost his company, a dreamer who was told no, a creator who watched his ideas disappear and still decided to create something new. Walt Disney's journey was not a straight path to success. It was filled with mistakes, risks, criticism, and uncertainty. But every failure taught him something. Every rejection pushed him forward. Every setback forced him to become more creative. The legacy of Walt Disney. Walt Disney did not build an empire because everything went perfectly. He built it because he continued moving forward when everything went wrong. He understood that imagination could be more powerful than circumstances. A bankrupt young animator became the creator of Mickey Mouse. A rejected filmmaker changed Hollywood. A man who was told animation would never succeed created stories that generations still remember. And a dream that once seemed impossible became one of the greatest entertainment legacies in history. The world remembers the magic. But behind that magic was a man who knew failure better than most. A man who lost everything and built something that would last forever.